Good afternoon. I am Denise Allen, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Research Administration and Central Services. We are very excited to welcome you to today's session on navigating the research lifecycle, understanding the resources, processes, and requirements. Our objective today is to really walk you through the life cycle and highlight the campus resources that are available to help you succeed. And you'll hear from a number of the offices in the Office of Research, and we will focus on funding opportunities, sponsored programs, research compliance and integrity, data security, technology transfer, the Institutional Review Board, and our animal care program. We will begin today's session discussing funding opportunities.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Grace Slew. I'm in sponsored programs. I'm the Associate Director on the awards side. And
my name is Ahmad Hakimulai. I am Executive Director. And today, Kelly was supposed to do this portion, but unfortunately she called in sick, so I am here.
Okay, so we first start off with funding opportunities, and this is actually under the purview of interdisciplinary research support. So this is not sponsored programs, but we do want to show you where the resources are to find grant opportunities for your project. You can also go to their research development toolbox for certain templates of letters of support or some collaboration types of templates. There's a weekly funding opportunities newsletter. You can sign up and you can customize it for the type of sponsors and research you're interested in. Also, there's one-on-one support. If you meet with IRS, they will talk with you about your funding specificities. And they have boot camps and office hours as well. So you can contact IRS at ucdavis.edu for funding development activities. Now we're going to talk about sponsor programs, which is Ahmed and I are here to represent sponsor programs, and I will let him start.
Okay, so again, I am not Kelly, but I will take care of her portion, and you see that we work very collaboratively together. The three of us, Kelly, Grace, and I, we run the sponsored programs. So sponsored programs, you know that our mission is to, our role is to basically submit proposals that researchers put together on behalf of the regions. We send them out, we negotiate and accept the awards that are received. And we also, I mean, there are situations that we have to issue sub-awards to the colleagues of the researchers from Davis, and so we issue sub-awards. So my office has three different areas: proposals, awards, and sub-awards. The type of agreements that they come through sponsored program, it depends on what we have to review and the business need of the proposal. The information, and as you see it on the slide there, there might be contracts that they would be a vendor contract, there might be a research agreement. There are relations that might not involve necessarily research, and they are other sponsored programs. But anyway, whatever it is, the proposals that seek extramural sources of funds, they come through our office, and they run through our office. But then also we have other offices on campus, like UC Health System, that there are certain type of agreements. They go through UC Health System. Let's see what else we have here. We talked about the sub-awards and other parts that are sponsored programs. So basically, again, there are several different ways that money can flow either to the campus or outside the campus. Again, here we talk about business contracts, health system, and sponsored programs. The one component of any budget that we worked on is indirect cost. Indirect cost is a portion of the actual cost of university performing any work. Sometimes it's outside entities, they might think that it's a profit for the university. That's not how it is. University performs all of the work based on the actual cost, and F&A is a part of the cost. Indirect cost is negotiated with the federal government. Depending on the type of project, indirect is different. Most frequently, the indirect that we have to use is the indirect which is called for activities which are organized research. There are indirects also available for instruction as well as other sponsored activities. But again, more frequently, the indirect which is used is the indirect associated with organized research. Again, the document is negotiated with the federal government, and we have it on our website. The base of indirect, that same document dictates what type of base we have to use. You see it on the slide. One type of base is called modified total direct cost. Again, these are all buzzwords that certain costs are not subject to indirect. For example, cost of tuition and fees, cost of equipment more than $5,000, and so on and so forth. And those details, we would be more than happy to work with you. Sometimes projects are subject to F&A based on the total cost, total direct cost, or total cost. So these are different ways of application of indirect. And again, our proposal team would work with you on your proposal when it comes in, and they would know how to help you to take care of all of those. So, Grace?
Okay, so let's just quickly go through the overview of a sponsored project. Starting at the upper left. So the idea has to come from an investigator. Sponsored programs is not going to come up with a research idea for anyone. So the investigator has to come up with an idea and find a funding opportunity. That's what I meant by, work with IRS to develop the funding opportunity. Then when you find a source of funding, the PI writes the proposal. And the department helps that PI help prepare the proposal details, such as the budget. And then the proposal is sent to sponsored programs for our review. Once we've reviewed it and determined that it meets the terms and conditions of the request for proposal, sponsored programs, once again, our office, will submit to the funding agency or grant approval to the department and PI to submit. But the permission has to come from sponsored programs to submit. And the agency then reviews the proposal, decides whether to fund or not. If the proposal is selected for funding, then that award document also is sent to sponsored programs, and we negotiate and sign that award document. And sponsored programs is delegated the authority to accept the award on behalf of the regents. And then the fund is set up with the award terms and dates and a budget. So the department would work with CGA, that's Contracts and Grants Accounting, to set up the fund. And then once that fund is set up, the PI starts to conduct the research and invoice or expense against that fund. So the department is responsible for monitoring the expenditures on that fund. And once the award ends, then sponsored programs pops back into the picture to help with the closeout of that project. And then this whole cycle starts again because the PI uses the results from that project to look for more funding and to submit more proposals. So here, just a quick overview of what the department administrators are responsible for in this life cycle. The department admins help the PI put together the proposal support. They meet with a PI to prepare the budget, to determine who has to prepare the different parts of the proposal. And then you submit the proposal to SPO early. We're going to emphasize that. Please submit this proposal to SPO early to let us have time for our review. And then the department has to then help the PI set up the fund and monitor expenditures and the financial activities. Sponsored programs is not responsible for the financial oversight of the award. Sponsor programs does help with the closeout process, however. So we do get the funding, accept the award, and then handle the closeout at the back end. And sponsor programs' role is to make sure that this proposal and supporting documentation are in place to submit that proposal to the sponsor. We make sure the budget is appropriate to the terms and requirements of the RFP. So the correct indirect cost rate has to be applied. That's something we always look for. And we make sure that any sub-awards off of that project, if there's a portion of the project to be sent out to another institution, we make sure that sub-award is properly budgeted. And then sponsor program submits to the sponsor. Once we get a notice of award or the award document for funding, we review the award terms and make sure it meets all university policies. And then we accept the award once the compliance items are put in place. And you'll hear more about the compliance from the other speakers today. And sponsor program signs the award on behalf of the regions. So sponsor programs does not write the proposal for anyone. We do not create or modify the budget. That's done at the department level. And we do not know when your proposal will be funded or not. We do not follow up with the sponsor and request updates on submitted proposals. What we do, however, is we do have extensive training. We have SDPS courses given online now. We have e-courses. And we also have budget labs and Cayuse training labs. That's our electronic routing system. So please do look at our website if you want more training for research administration. Okay.
Thank you, Jason and Maud. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about research compliance and integrity. This office has 6 primary service areas: export controls, financial conflicts of interest, human subjects research, quality, integrity, and quality assurance, research misconduct, research responsible conduct of research, and then stem cell research oversight. The primary topic first is export controls. To give you an overview of when you should contact RCI for consultation as part of your sponsored projects or other activities. And those areas would include shipping, which includes hand carrying items internationally whenever you plan to travel internationally. If you are engaged in sponsored projects and the sponsor has any type of citizenship or publication restrictions or requirements, if you're purchasing equipment that may be controlled under U.S. export control laws, if you will allow a non-U.S. person to have access to controlled items, and typically controlled items are those items that are considered dual-use technologies that have a military or other application that has a defense or other security risk. Working with a foreign military or undertaking any activities in partnership with organizations or individuals in sanctioned countries or countries for which there are embargoes or other restrictions. The Research Compliance and Integrity Office can provide you guidance about how to engage in those activities. We want to remove barriers so that you can complete your sponsored projects. We will not tell you no. We will try to find a way to make that possible. It may involve a license or some other permissible action to support that engagement. We can also complete restricted party screenings to help you identify if there are any potential risks so you can make an informed decision and develop strategies to mitigate those risks. And then we also will take the lead in completing the due diligence for you before you engage in activities that involve export controls. Export controls does have one area where there is an exception for licensing and other types of restrictions, and that is the fundamental research exception. Under that exception, you would be allowed to engage in the activity that would normally require a license if the work is considered fundamental research. It has to be conducted free of any restrictions on publication or dissemination, and it has to occur at an accredited institution in the United States. But do keep in mind that the fundamental research exclusion does not include any research that involves technology, software, or services. The RCI, or office, is also responsible for financial conflicts of interest. Depending on your sponsor, you may be required to submit one of 4 different forms. There's a 700U, a Form 800, a PHS disclosure, and a supplemental form that you would submit if you answered yes to any of the significant financial interest questions on the forms. The Research Compliance and Integrity website provides a wonderful resource to determine which form you're required to submit. So in the slides and on our website, it walks you through the different types of projects and sponsors and the forms that would be required. So for example, privately funded research requires the submission of a 700U by the PI only. And if you answer yes to any of those questions, you would also submit the supplement. So this slideshow and our website walks you through all of the requirements for the different sponsors. I do want to highlight that if your research is sponsored by PHS or organizations that operate under the PHS rules, you will also need to complete mandatory conflict of interest research briefing. And you just log into the UC Learning Center, look for the compliance briefing, and it will pop up. It takes about 35 to 40 minutes to complete. All disclosures are made in our electronic system. You cannot submit paper disclosures. Here's the URL to navigate to the ECOI system. This site also has wonderful quick start guides. If you haven't submitted a disclosure before, it takes you quickly through the steps. It provides technical guidance on which types of browsers to use, or if you have an administrative staff member who provides you with support and provides instructions on how to give them access so that they can help you with your disclosure, and then provides a more detailed overview of the 4 different form types. We have a very robust frequently asked questions resource on this site that defines all of the different examples of conflicts of interest and significant financial interests. Just a few to highlight as the primary examples that we see here. At Davis, that must be disclosed if you hold an equity interest or have stock in an entity that supports your research, if you accept travel reimbursement, consulting, income, or other kinds of financial arrangements with an entity that supports your research, or if you have a financial interest in a business entity, which could include your own startup company that is related to the research or would result from the research. We have a conflict of interest committee that reviews the disclosures of significant financial interests. They determine if a conflict exists, and if one does exist, they will provide very detailed guidance on how to manage or mitigate that risk, usually with a written management plan. RCI is also responsible for stem cell research oversight. All UC Davis activities that involve stem cell research have to be conducted in compliance with the applicable regulations. If you navigate to this website, you can read those regulations. There are FAQs and guides to help you complete and submit the application. You can download the application form there and learn more about submitting your request to the Stem Cell Research Oversight Committee. We also have a unit that completes audits of human subjects research, both a random selection for quality assurance as well as for cause audits. And you can obtain additional information about that activity and that service online. We are also accountable for research misconduct, and the office investigates and evaluates all allegations of research misconduct, primarily fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. There is a research compliance hotline here at UC Davis. The number is listed here, as well as a California confidential hotline that you can contact. And the website provides additional information about what constitutes research misconduct, how to report any allegations of research misconduct, and then how those investigations are carried out. Lastly, the office is responsible for the Responsible Conduct of Research program, and this is a training seminar that covers 12 topics each year and may satisfy the NIH, NSF, or USDA NIFA grant requirements for training in responsible conduct of research. In order to receive a certificate of completion, the researcher must complete at least 8 of the online modules. To see the curriculum for the year, you can navigate to the LMS and search for RCR. These modules typically begin in October and end in May. We do not have an RCR seminar program over the summer. I'm now going to hand it over to Diana Francis to talk about Innovation Access, and she is joining us remotely.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great time at the expo. I'm Diana Francis, an Intellectual Property Officer at Innovation Access. Innovation Access is part of an Office of Research department called Information and Technology Commercialization. We call ourselves ITC. ITC is also the home of Venture Catalyst. Our two groups work together closely to bring innovation to the public through the licensing of university intellectual property and UC Davis startups. Next slide, please. Innovation Access is the campus authority on intellectual property matters. Next slide, please, AJ. Such as copyright, inventions, patenting, trademarks, and trade secrets. It also works on material and data transfer agreements, which are known as MTAs and DTAs. Today, the topic of my talk is MTAs and DTAs. Next slide, please. MTAs are legal agreements designed to protect tangible research property, also called TRP. TRP is material created during the course of research and not covered by a patent. DTAs protect data and information created during research and while administering healthcare at the medical center. Although not patentable, the material and data are considered valuable research property. UC researchers not only share their TRP and research data, they also receive material from other researchers, institutions, and businesses from around the globe. When I say MTA, I'm just kind of shortening things, but I do mean MTAs and DTAs, and sometimes even confidentiality agreements. The reasons for MTAs is to protect the rights of the property owner. We work on MTAs to share plants, seeds, trees, animal cancer cells, research mice and other animal-related materials, blood, saliva, cells, and tissue from humans, drugs from pharmaceutical companies, compounds. One researcher got brain tissue samples from a brain bank in the Netherlands. The types of material and data shared is really limitless. One time I did an MTA for dirty cow water from a cow farm that seemed really weird to me, but I'm not the one doing the research. All of the different types of material and data our researchers share and receive is one of the things that keeps this job fascinating. By the way, we have 2 open positions for MTA analysts. If you think this is something you would like to do, we welcome all applicants. Don't let the job description scare you though. All types of experiences are considered during the interview process. We just hired someone from academic advising, so check out the job posting on the UC Davis employment website. Although MTAs and DTAs are not required by university policy, we highly recommend them. In most cases, when UC receives another party's material, the owner requires a legal agreement be signed. These agreements should always be signed by a university authorized official. If researcher signs the agreement themselves, they could be held personally responsible. Innovation Access is the authorized office for these types of agreements. There are a lot of reasons we do these types of legal agreements. For one, I'll list a few. The owner wants to be clear what the material is used for. If the material is shared without an agreement, the person getting the material can do whatever they want with it. Most times, there are terms in the agreement that say the material can only be used for a very specific purpose. Owners also don't want the data or material shared without their approval. In most cases, we can't share with anyone outside the researcher's lab. If the researcher does want to share the material outside their lab, We have to go back to the owner and get their permission. As a public research institution, our number one principle is the open dissemination of our research results. Some owners of material may want to prevent the results from being published because the publication may say something negative about their material. We can't allow for that. We must be free to share our research results openly and freely. This policy has actually stopped some researchers from some companies, from sharing their material because they were worried that something negative might be published about their company or their material or their business. Another reason, the parties also don't want to be held liable for the action of what someone else does with the material. For example, UC shares material with someone and they use it in a dangerous way. UC would not want to be held liable for their actions. Parties to these agreements also want to make sure if there is an invention with their material that they would be notified and that they might potentially have rights to that invention because their material or data was an integral part of that invention. Joint ownership of inventions and invention notifications is something our office would handle. Having MTAs to share material and data mean the parties understand what is expected of them and hopefully won't be any misunderstanding. There can be many other terms contained in MTAs, but I'll spare you the details today. If you'd like to learn more about MTAs or DTAs, you can call upon anyone listed on this slide. The team listed here is the current group of analysts working on MTAs and DTAs. I work with the analysts to oversee the work, provide guidance. I was an MTA analyst for 9 years and was recently promoted to IP officer and now have the delegated authority to sign MTAs and DTAs on behalf of the regions. Next slide, please. IA recently launched a brand new online technology management platform called Menuet. The slide picture is a glimpse of what our new online agreement request portal looks like. Researchers no longer have to fill out our clunky MTRF document. Instead, they can submit their MTAs, DTAs, and CDA requests right online. Since our soft launch in November, nearly 300 researchers and their staff have opened accounts on the portal. Researchers have requested over 300 new agreements online. By logging into their accounts, researchers can see all of their technology assets in one place, including their patents and their MTAs, which officer and analyst are assigned to their patent cases and MTAs, the status of their patents and MTAs. They can retrieve copies of all of their agreements, and researchers are also able to submit their records of inventions via the online platform. Next slide, please. Last fiscal year, the MTA team executed 200 data transfer agreements. Of those 200 agreements, 125 of them were for the sharing of human subject data. Because of the rapidly increasing demand to share human subject data and to support our public benefit mission, the UC Davis Medical Center created a Health Data Governance Committee. DCS was designed to assure that the request to share data outside the medical center meets their mission and comply with HIPAA and other patient privacy matters. The Data Governance Committee consists of members from hospital administration, compliance, IRB, IT, privacy, and innovation and access. The DSC has created an online data sharing request system. They've implemented procedures and processes to review all of these requests. A committee will review and approve requests prior to the MTA team putting any type of data transfer agreement in place. Next slide, please. You can check out the DCS, see what the DCS is up to, and learn more about sharing human subject data by clicking on the links on the slide. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
All right. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nicole Walters. I'm the Associate Director for IRB Administration, and you just got a little lead in with our last speaker talking about data sharing and human subjects research. So now we're going to talk a little more about IRB and what we do. First, we'll just start setting the scene. What is the role of the IRB? How many people in this room have actually submitted to the IRB? Okay, so a fair number of you have an idea of what we do. We look specifically at human subjects research. So research studies that engage or interact with human subjects or their private identifiable information or specimen are our purview. That's what we look at. And when we're reviewing those studies, we look at a couple of different components. The first one is an ethical review process. So we look at the impact on the rights and welfare of the human subjects. So this means when someone's enrolling in a study, we make sure that they are informed about their participation, that they know it's voluntary, that they have information about the risks of participation and the possible benefits. And we make sure that all of that information is represented to them before they participate, and then as they participate, that the risks and benefits are reasonable for their involvement in the study. We also look at legal requirements. So these have to do with either something from FDA, like if you're testing a medical drug or a device, the common rule if you have federal funding, HIPAA, if you're accessing PHI for your research. There are a few others like FERPA that come into play, depending on the study design and who you're interacting with or what data you're interacting with. So we review for those additional requirements. And then lastly, we look at some institutional requirements. So things like template language in your consent document to make sure that you disclose any financial interest or ancillary reviews, pathology, the material data transfer agreements that we just had, things like that. So we also have a role in making sure there are some compliance elements from the institution's perspective. So what kind of applications do we review at the IRB? Always new projects, right? So before you start a research study, you submit it, if there are human subjects involved, you submit it to us. Any changes to the active studies. So since our job is to protect human subjects, if you're conducting research and then you want to change something about it, we have to look at it to make sure that those changes don't impact the rights and welfare of the subjects or any of the compliance requirements that we've already assessed. Annual progress reports. Not every study requires an annual progress report. Those that are greater than minimal risk or FDA regulated have to be looked at once a year. So those always come back to us for an evaluation to make sure that things are progressing as expected, that there are no changes to the risk-benefit ratio, that subjects aren't being unduly influenced or coerced into involvement, things like that. We also look at reports of events. So say you have an active study and someone's injured while they're participating. Maybe, it could be a physical injury, it could be a disclosure of their information inappropriately. For example, this is one that happens occasionally. Someone's laptop is stolen and it has private information on it. Another one, say the research team went to email their participants and they CC'd everyone instead of BCC'd everyone. So all those people's emails were disclosed as participants in research, things like that. Those kind of reports get submitted to us so we can assess the impact to the research subjects, let the researcher know if they need to notify their subjects or what actions they need to take, and if any changes to the research need to be made to protect subjects going forward. We also look at reliance agreements. This is specific to studies that are taking place at multiple sites. So if the same research project is being done at multiple places, you can actually set up an agreement so that only one IRB has to review it. We have a process to create these agreements with other institutions to limit the administrative burden for the oversight of the studies. Special thing to be aware of, if you do not have a reliance agreement, you have to have approval at each site. So just because a research study has been approved at another location, that does not mean it can take place at UC Davis without either IRB approval or a reliance agreement that's put in place between the IRBs. Researchers cannot sign their own reliance agreements. They need to work with the IRB to get those put in place. And then lastly, we often get requests for determinations. One of the most common questions we get at the IRB is, does my study need to be submitted to the IRB? So these requests for determinations are for activities that look kind of like human subjects research, but aren't. So maybe it's a quality assessment project. Maybe you're using de-identified data, so they aren't actual human subjects. Things where you are going to maybe go publish your results and the journal is going to want evidence that the IRB looked at it and that human subjects protections were considered. And then we determine that there were no human subjects or no research activities, for example. So requests for determinations fall into that category. As I mentioned, the most common question, do I need to submit to the IRB? So this is the analysis that we go through when a project comes to our office. Item 1, is this a research project? There are a lot of projects that look like research that aren't for our purposes. So the definition of research for IRB, because a lot of times people can feel like maybe it's a student who's doing a research project for academic purposes. It may not be research as defined by the IRB. So for us, research is a systematic investigation designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge. The most important piece of that for anyone to take away is the intent of the project. Are you trying to generate knowledge that's going to be applied broadly beyond the site or the scope of the original collection? So when a project comes to us, pretty much everyone has a systematic investigation. You're doing something for a specific reason to collect information, right? But what are you planning to do with the results of that information? That's step 1, where we decide if it is a research project. After that, we ask, are there human subjects involved? For our purposes, a human subject can be a person who you interact with in some way to collect information about them. You could manipulate their environment, you could ask them to change their behavior, you could do questionnaires or surveys. It could even be someone who you don't ever see. You post an online survey that's anonymous and they click a link and they complete it. They still did it something for research purposes and you collected information from them. So they become a human subject in research. Or it could be someone's private identifiable information or biospecimen that's been collected for some other purpose that's being repurposed for research. Like we talked about those material data transfers, right? So when someone receives identifiable information from another source at the institution and then wants to conduct research on it, the IRB has to look at it to make sure that those human subjects, which are just identifiable data sets, are protected, which is typically looking at the data protection plans. So anyway, we ask, is it research? Are there human subjects? If either of those are no, no IRB required. If yes, then you need to submit to the IRB. And we'll review it for those ethical, legal, and institutional requirements that I mentioned earlier. Okay, pro tip for our researchers, as I mentioned before, accessing private identifiable information for research requires IRB review, even if your job allows you access to those things for other purposes. So you're a faculty member, you're a staff member, you have access to student records. You are a clinician at the medical center, you have access to medical records. You're a researcher, you have access to existing research records. Those pieces of information were provided for a specific purpose. And using them for research purposes, if you are going to access them in an identifiable format, does require IRB oversight. So you need to have a protocol in place if it's for research with the IRB before you conduct that activity. So when does IRB review take place? Well, our job is protecting human subjects. So in order to do that, you have to have IRB approval before you start any of your research activities. We can't protect human subjects if you've already done the research, right? So you come to us before you start. Once you've gotten your IRB approval, anytime you want to change your research. So again, as I mentioned, if we've reviewed it for compliance and you change something about it, we also have to review that change to make sure that it doesn't put the study out of compliance. There is a special asterisk on this one, unless the change you're making is meant to eliminate a hazard to the subjects. So again, we want to protect human subjects. If you've identified a risk to your subjects, stop putting them at risk and then tell us. And that's a 5-day reporting window for those activities. So they're not very common aside from the COVID pandemic, which we had a tremendous volume of this type of change. But typically, most research studies know what they need to change ahead of time. So maybe it's a new recruitment process, maybe it's a new population, maybe it's a new site you want to visit, whatever it may be, you notify us first. Unless there's a hazard to your subjects, then you make the change first and then notify us. Continuing review progress reports are submitted to us typically annually. Not every study requires continuing review. Greater than minimal risk and FDA regulated studies require continuing review. All of those studies get a 1-year approval period. I describe this as like your driver's license. You have to get IRB approval again before your study expires. You don't wait till it expires and then come to the IRB for your next approval period. So if you are regulated and require those ongoing continuing review reports, We expect submission 45 days before your study expires. Your expiration date will be in your letter and also in our system, IRBnet, so you can always find it, and you should submit to us with ample time for us to review and approve and give you a new approval period before the study expiration. And then for those reportable events that we talked about, things like someone being hurt, something being disclosed that's not appropriate, maybe you have an audit, you need to submit reports to us. We have a list of all of the reportable events on our website, and there are 2 different reporting timeframes. One is 5 days and one is 10 days. It depends on the event. Typically, things that demonstrate a new risk to subjects are a 5-day reporting period. Things that are just sort of an FYI, like this happened and we want you to know, are a 10-day reporting period. But you can go to our reportable events page and find all that information there. What does the process look like when you submit? So we have also an electronic system. It's called IRBnet. It's a third-party system, so it does not have single sign-on. You have to create and register with IRBnet when you want to use it. Once you've created your account, you can add all the projects you want, and you can get access to all the projects that anyone has. They have to share them with you, okay? But high level, you register with IRBnet, you create your project in the system, you're going to upload all the documents there. So we have these document wizards that are online forms that you'll complete, and you will upload all your supporting documents, your consent forms, your flyers, whatever else. You'll get all the signatures you need, and then you submit that in the system to us. I can guarantee you it is 99% of the time we're going to ask for something to be changed or a clarification in the application. It's not you, it's just that it's very complicated, and these things require a little bit of negotiation typically when they get submitted. So we'll get an application in, we'll request either some additional documents, we'll request some clarifications, there'll be some language that we ask you to update somehow. You'll make those changes in the documents and upload them in IRBnet and then notify us that's done. Once you've done that response, we can go back and forth doing this for a while we work it out, all of the different pieces of it, until we get to the point where we issue a determination letter. So once we issue that determination letter, the process for that submission is complete. In many cases, that ends with an approval. In some cases, it will end with us issuing one of 2 things, either a modifications required letter or a deferral, which means the study was reviewed at full board and we need you to make some more changes and you need to resubmit another application. If that happens, you will know, and the analyst working with you will be communicating with you about it, so you will absolutely know next steps. But I just want to be very, very clear with everyone to please, when you get your IRB approval, go download your letter, your approval letter from the system. There are often conditions on there like, don't start this study until you've gotten your material data transfer or you've submitted your conflict of interest report or some other item. So always, once you get the notification that the system has approved the study, also look at your letter for any conditions of approval. This is an additional resource slide. As has been mentioned a couple times now, data and data sharing is very important and very big in research right now, and these are some resources for people to reach out to, depending on what type of information you might need. The IRB does play a role in data protection for research, human subjects research data, but there are also many other considerations from the institution's perspective. So I'm just going to leave this up here for a second. We have a campus privacy officer for UC Davis. We have a hospital privacy officer for the health systems. We have subject data expert, John Tupin, IRB director. We have a HIPAA patient data contact and a FERPA student data contact, as well as data access and delivery contacts for both the hospital and the campus. All right, and that is, oh, I have one more thing to say. Where can you get more information? Very important, our website. So our website is on the Office of Research website. It's research.ucdavis.edu. If you go to that policy and compliance heading, it's one of the drop-down items. I think it's the 3rd one, IRB administration. You can find it there and navigate to our For Researchers page. We have a ton of information on here, how to submit, what to submit, when to submit, what we're looking for. And we also have our help desk, which is hs-irbeducation@ucdavis.edu. We manage this website, this email address all the time, every day, and it's a great place to just send general inquiries or status updates or anything else you might need to ask the IRB. It will go to our intake person and then will be distributed or answered based on the type of question. And that is my last slide. All right, research and teaching up next.
Hello, everyone. We're going to close out your session today by talking about our animal care program and how it relates to investigators and research and those using animals in their research programs. So my name is Lori Brignola. I'm the director of our animal care program, and this is Donna Routley. She and I will be sharing this presentation today. Donna is the director of our IACUC office here on campus. Let's go ahead and get rolling then. Our plan is to cover four major topics. So we want to talk about our scope. Lots of people don't understand what an animal care program is, so we want to talk a little bit about that and tell you what ours involves. Our main goal today is really to give some tips to investigators, especially those new investigators coming to campus that maybe haven't worked with our program before, especially those who have worked with research programs at other academic institutions, because all of ours vary so much it can be incredibly difficult for someone to come from one institution, even just down the road, and then come to ours because things are so very different. So we're hoping to give some hot tips on how to make that process go a little more smoothly. We're also going to talk about processes that happen in tandem. It may sound like there's a million things that have to happen, but lots of them are happening all at the same time. So we want to clarify that and make certain folks know that it really shouldn't take months and months and months to happen, as long as we've got all the proper information up front and can roll those out the way it goes. And then we're also going to end up with some key contacts and who to reach out to when you have questions. So our vision is really very clear. We want to ensure that people and animals live healthier lives through the very judicious, respectful use of animal models. And our mission goes along with that. We're here to serve our campus community, or we're here to serve our animals for sure, and we're here to serve our students who want to learn through that process. Just to give folks a feel about our scope, I mean, we all know that UC Davis is a large campus, but our animal care program in particular is incredibly large. So we rank in the top 5 throughout the nation for academic institutions, depending on if you're talking about the number of animals, the scope of animal species, or just the volume of space that the animals take up within a campus setup. So to give you a feel, we just wanted to cover some of the current numbers that we have. So currently we have, I want to say approximately because it literally changes minute to minute. So there are approximately 1,410 active animal care and use protocols here on campus at the moment. We have over 500 principal investigators, over 3,000 staff. 3,000 folks that are working with animals, be it from a husbandry perspective or working in a research and teaching lab, doing wet labs with other students, maybe at the veterinary school, that sort of thing. Our program encompasses all of that. We have 50, that's 50 different vivaria on campus. And a vivaria can mean anything from a very large facility, so for example, the Primate Center is one of our larger vivaria on campus. One of those vivaria may just be a single room with 5 or 6 fish tanks in it as well. But they all have to have that same level of oversight and the same level of guidance from both our regulators and from us here on campus to make certain everything's being managed appropriately. And then 274-ish investigator laboratory rooms where animals may go as part of their research scope. And that's important for us because each of those laboratories needs to be inspected, just like the vivaria do. All of that, they're all expected to follow those same regulations and guidelines that we're held to. And we just wanted to point out a couple of the differences between now and pre-pandemic. So our number of protocols have gone down. Everything else has stayed pretty much the same through that whole time course, or our laboratories actually have even gone up. To give you a feel for the scope, so these numbers represent not the number of animals that are actually on campus at any one time, but the number of animals that are approved on protocols. So some of those animals sort of may come and go on campus. Some of these may reflect clinical trials. So these are animals that are privately owned but are part of a clinical trial, very much like our human clinical trials, but it's being done with pets over at the veterinary school. But I think it's important to know that we've got over 5 million animals that are covered on these different types of protocols. The vast majority by far are fish. 4.5 million of those animals are fish. Most of those fish are zebrafish that are about an inch long. And actually, most of those animals the research actually happens when they're a larva, when they're really, 3 to 4 millimeters long. So while they count as an animal at that time, they're really just inky dinky and teeny tiny. Lots of frogs, about 500,000 frogs. Most people think of research animals as mice and rats, right? So this is just to point out that at least on our campus, mice are not a huge number of our research animals. That fair number of rats we have a primate center. So we've got over 4,000 non-human primates as part of that research and teaching program there, and that's pretty unusual for an academic institution. There's only 7 primate centers in the United States right now at various different facilities. Lots of cows. We run a dairy. We've got cows that go through clinical trials. We do lots of teaching with cows in our animal science department. So that's another thing that's a little unusual about our animal care program here. And the same with the horses and the sheep and the cats. While we do have a fairly large cat program where we've got a couple of hundred cats that we maintain on campus as part of our nutrition calling, most of those cats are captured in clinical trials that are happening at the veterinary school. And at this point, I'm going to hand over this control to Donna, and she's going to work on the next bits of the presentation.
Hi, everybody. As Lori said, I'm Donna Routley. I'm the IACUC director. And Lori's given you a start of a scope for who we are as far as number of projects, number of animals. So I'd also like to say who we are as far as our resources. We have a faculty-based IACUC. And our IACUC has cross-discipline expertise. We have a very large IACUC. We have one for the campus. It covers, we have people from bioengineering, we have people from animal science, we have people from the med school, the vet school, animal science, across the gamut. We really try and have wide representation. Again, it is faculty-based as well. We have board-certified lab animal veterinarians, of which Lori is in charge of. We have veterinarians that specialize at the primate center. We have veterinarians at the campus veterinary services, and then we have our large animal field service veterinarians. Ultimately, they all report to our attending veterinarian, Dr. Lori Brignolo. We have very talented animal facility managers, and these are folks that they are included in that 3,000 group of people that Lori was talking about, taking care of your animals day in and day out. We have a very engaged institutional official. His picture is up here. That's Dr. Mohapatra. And we have a very engaged professional EH&S and occupational health service oversight. Not all campuses have that on campus, so we're very fortunate in that regard. You can see by these red circles on this map, this is a campus map overview, and you can see there's red lines around certain buildings and areas and complexes. That is just to give you an idea of where we are spread across campus. Many institutions have one single building with their vivaria, and we do not. This is important because it adds to the complications of things, especially if you're trying to navigate around campus or figure out where am I going to house my animals, where do I even begin? And then, as Lori mentioned, we have over 50 vivaria. This is a list. I don't expect anybody to try and read it right now. There's a lot of information on there, a lot of names, a lot of numbers, but it just shows the different groups, the different vivaria, the different departments, where they report to, who they report to, how many we have. There's everything from individual investigator-maintained labs, which we actually discourage, to the large vivaria, such as the primate center. So, taking this list and moving forward, where do you begin? So I'm going to give you a couple of really basic tips, but I think they'll really help if you can remember these. It'll help you be successful as you start your research, animal research, at least on campus. And these tips come from our experience of people who have not followed these tips and the difficulties and the delays that it can cause. So thinking back to this list of the 50 vivaria, where do you start? We're spread out all over campus. There's 50 different places you could house your animals. Who do you begin to talk to? Hopefully that discussion is going to start very, very early on, not the month before you want to do your research, but maybe during the recruitment process or very, very early on. It's critical to have somebody within your department that actually works with animals and so that they can help you, because everybody's The scope and objectives of different projects are going to be very different. Just as an example, maybe you're working with sheep and you have met somebody at the cafeteria that's also working with sheep, but you're doing biomedical research, they're doing ag research. And so just because you're working with sheep, the housing requirements could be vastly different. And so this is why it's really important to get tied in with somebody within your department who's doing a similar type of work as you are, somebody who uses animals, somebody who knows who within the department to go to order the animals. It can vary from department to department. Another tip is, again, thinking about housing early on. Find out from somebody in your department, where are you going to house your animals? Is there space to house your animals? And that's a conversation we really want to encourage you to have early on, especially if you're in the recruitment process. If you're housing animals within the one of the vivaria, one of the large vivaria areas called tracts, they actually have a space request form, and we would want you to fill that out in advance. But again, different departments have different requirements. There are requirements for environmental health and safety reviews, EH&S safety reviews. You might require a BUA, you might require a chemical safety oversight, you might require a radiological use authorization. Those things need to get started early. And again, as Lori said, it sounds like there's a million things to do, but if you start them all on the early stage and work on them simultaneously, we'll be able to approve your project ultimately in a very good systematic format and much quicker than if you were just to space them out or try and submit your animal care protocol and then be frustrated because you can't get your BUA approved ahead of time. Veterinary consultation. Lori's group, Primate Center, other groups, they will give you wonderful free advice and take advantage of it because they can guide you as far as what do you need as far as drugs? What kind of support? Perhaps you might need surgical support. What can you expect to receive from them versus what do you have to provide yourself? We have regulatory oversight, teaching and training. We want to be part of your team early on. And so, again, where do you start? Back to the IACUC protocol. And even if it's like a month or 2 months or 6 months before you're going to start your protocol, feel welcome, please, to phone our office, contact the IACUC office, and we might be able to give you some help and direction of who you might need to talk to. If we know and have an idea of what kind of project you're working on, we can probably direct you to the right people. And we may not have the answer, but we might know who to direct you to, and that can be as valuable as anything. There's a requirement for what we call ACU 101, Animal Care and Use 101, and that's a basic laws and regulations class. It's online, it takes about an hour to do, maybe 45 minutes, and it's specific to UC Davis. So a lot of people say, well, can I just use my city training? And we say city training is great, but no, we actually really need you to complete this ACU 101 before you can be listed on a roster for an animal care and use protocol, because it talks about things that are specifically unique to UC Davis that will help you be successful and remain in compliance. We have an occupational health program on campus. We have occupational health physicians. And so anybody who's listed on an animal care and use protocol needs to do these two things. They need to complete the ACU 101. They need to be a part of the occupational health program. What I might need out of the occupational program might be very, very different than what you would need. And so it's very tailored to the individual and the type of research you're doing, tailored to your own health particular situation. So Lori was talking about what happens in tandem. All of this happens in tandem. There's a lot more steps than what you see on the slide, but just as a very, very basic overview, hopefully all these other conversations have occurred, and then the PI submits their protocol or their amendment if they already have an approved protocol. And then it gets sent out to the veterinary staff. It gets reviewed by a member of the IACUC office, and it also goes back to EH&S. So this is kind of an opportunity for us to catch, for some reason, if somebody doesn't have a BUA. We won't be approving the protocol if you need a BUA and it's not approved yet. So this is our safeguard for that. So again, we would really encourage you to have those conversations early on. Get going on the BUA process. I'm just using that as an example. The Biosafety Committee meets once a month. The IACUC meets twice a month. But if you don't have that BUA in place, we can't approve your protocol, so it can get hung up in that regard. Again, work with us. Early communication is the biggest thing I can stress on this. And then once it goes through these, the middle section, what we call the pre-review, it has veterinary review where the vets may reach out to you and discuss perhaps a different alternative for a drug regimen or anesthetic regimen. The IACUC staff might reach out to you and say, you know, we understand, or we think we understand what you're saying as far as why you're justifying your numbers a certain way, but it doesn't really satisfy the requirements of the committee. So we need you to, you know, ask some follow up with some additional information. Kind of like what Nicole was saying. You know, there's a lot of back and forth. Don't take it personally. We know what gets approved. We know what gets hung up, and our goal is really to try and help you with that in advance. I'm seeing a message on here. This meeting has ended. Is that still? It's still up there. Okay. Sorry about that. There's a lot of back and forth questions, and it's all based on our experience of what we're going to ultimately have to justify to USDA when they come and visit. Any of our other site visitors, our ALAC site visit, they ask us a lot of questions, and at that point, we want to be able to support you as the researcher. So what can you expect after your protocol is, again, you can expect help from our office. We might not be the ones who know the exact answer, but we definitely can point you in the right direction as to who you might need to talk to. If you want to do something that you're not sure it's approved in your protocol, or you're not sure if you need an amendment for us, call us. We'll help you out with that and get you going in the right direction. We really want to maintain compliance and help you maintain compliance. And we'd much rather have the conversations early on and not wait till there's been a problem. Again, at the same time though, if something goes haywire and you think you've done something wrong, or you think that you're having a problem, you need to make an amendment, call us, we'll walk you through it, whatever it is. We are your liaison for the IACUC committee itself for USDA. USDA comes unannounced, they always come to our office first. And so if they come and they're doing a USDA inspection of your facility, we will be accompanying them, and we will be there to support you in your research and help defend any questions if they have any. We are your liaison with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we're your liaison with ALAC, which is our oversight body that comes every 3 years. So a couple of key contacts. If you don't remember anything else, just remember that you can contact the IACUC office, you can contact Campus Veterinary Services, you can contact TRACS, Teaching Research Animal Care Services Business Office, and if we can't answer your question, we'll point you in the right direction. I think that is it. Oh. Thank you, everybody.
AJ, do we have time for questions?